Hello and welcome to the new Hudson and Thames YouTube lecture. A lot of things were said and done about the backtesting. How should you perform it? What data should you use? What metrics should you apply? How to test for the confidence level of your backtest? There's a lot of formulas and techniques involved in that regard to ensure the most technical quality of your backtest. But something that has much less highlight in the community is, but how do you prepare for a backtest? We as humans are biased creatures. We want ourselves to do well. And as quantitative researcher, me, and I'm sure as a lot of people who listen to this video we want our models to perform well. And this, more often than not, this leads to biased comprehension of the results and of the testing process in general. So to overcome it, it would be great that the framework has existed to kind of act as a sanity check of sorts. So we at Hudson and Thames, heavily inspired by some incredible papers by lead practitioners, devised a small questionnaire that will help you to see your backtest clearly and your model in full detail and understand every shortcoming and kind of act as your guideline of sorts to perform your perfect backtest. So hence the name, before you backtest, the new protocol in the era of machine learning. My name is Valeriia Pervushyna, and today I'll be your presenter. I'm a quantitative researcher at Hudson and Thames, and I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. So the short, brief agenda of our lecture will start with acknowledgement the two founding papers for our research, then continue on to what's actually the winner's curse in quantitative research, then we'll proceed on to the deceiving nature of data. And after all the preamble, we'll continue on to the star of our presentation, actually our new backtesting protocol. We'll cover such topics as research motivation, sample choice and data, cross-validation, model dynamics and complexity. That topic will be more machine learning centric, and of course the research culture. We'll finish up with our conclusions, and of course we'll provide the reference to the aforementioned papers, so you could check it out too. So without further ado, let's start. The two founding papers of our research would be a backtesting protocol in the era of machine learning, hence the name of the presentation, by Bob Arnott, Campbell R. Harvey, and Harry Markowitz from 2018. The paper possesses a great example of a very intricate research and understanding of the nature of quantitative finance, quantitative research is in quantitative research. It provides an even more detailed questionnaire with even more in-depth questions on how your backtest performs or how you're building it. So I highly recommend you to check out this paper after finishing this lecture. The second would be Being Honest in Backtest Reporting, a template for disclosing multiple tests by Marco Lopez de Prado and Frank Bozzi. A great stellar paper that highlights the importance of first and second degree errors, what are our faultiness at recognizing them, and provides a framework for disclosing the probability of error and the way maybe it may even change your outlook on how you look at the backtest and multiple testing in particular. So let's continue. A lot of people heard about winner's curse in auction theory. It says that usually the winner's bid is much higher than the actual value of the product. But what's the winner's curse in quantitative research? As I said before, during our kind of introduction, we all want our models to do well. So the quants most common mistake is being seduced by the data into thinking the model is better than it is. Models with strong results from the get-go will be tested, modified, and retested hundreds of times, while models that displays poor results in the beginning will quickly be discarded. And that's kind of what brings us to the faultiness in data and the deceiving nature of the data. As you can see, the strategy on the right-hand side performs pretty well, but this strategy isn't exactly like perfect representation of a completely data mined strategy with zero sense basis whatsoever, and the results, as you can see, are pretty good, pretty stable. One example I would like to provide for you is like the infinite monkey theorem. It states that monkey hitting keys on a random basis on a keyboard for an infinite amount of time will almost surely type any given text, such as complete works of William Shakespeare, Dostoevsky's works, or even your entire call history and text history with your mom. Pretty good, right? So in the case of the shown strategy, this is a perfect example of such monkey work, as it actually forms the long-short portfolios based on the letters in the company's ticker symbol. Just think of it, like what information can it even really harbor? So we can see 26 letters in alphabet, 2 pairings of 3 possible letters in the ticker symbol, thousands of combinations are possible. So in searching for every potential combination, voila, we can, and we have a high probability, achieve at least one good result, as we can see in this page. So what's our outlook on it? What are we doing about this? Countless thousands of models are tried by practitioners to beat the market. What does it say about those models that do? Some good models will fail in the test period and will be forgotten. On the other hand, a bad model that works well in the test period might incentivize the researcher to seek a reason justifying its performance, just as I mentioned before. These are false positives and true negatives. Even more common than false positives are exaggerated positives. Exaggerated positives is a positive that is kind of showcased to have a much, much stronger and valuable output than it's actually likely to perform in the future. And it is a pretty big kind of difficulty for us to sometimes discern between one or other. So what's our approach to this? As researchers, we really want to minimize false positives. Hence, our kind of solution for this would be the new protocol. The use of protocols has been shown to increase performance standards and prevent failure as tasks become increasingly complex. People like professions like pilots, surgeons, like even builders and certified engineers have protocols in place to ensure that all processes run smoothly without any problems. So it's only natural for such complex processes that are involved in quantitative finance that we as researchers have our own protocol to abide to before starting a backtest. In this presentation, we're going to showcase the backtesting protocol questionnaire ideas that closely follow the ones presented in the aforementioned papers. So let's continue onto our first category of questions, research motivation. Our main incentive in this cluster of questions would be to determine what and why are you doing the things you do and before starting the backtest. The main point is doing this before you even try to do anything with your backtest. What is your hypothesis? Does your hypothesis have a solid economic foundation? These two questions are crucial to have the discipline to avoid most of the overfitting problems down the line. As if you understand the concept of your idea and your hypothesis and disclose it clearly from the get-go, you would really less likely would be tempted by the data or kind of fooled by randomness. Also, the next important question to ask yourself is, what would be the decision-making metric for this strategy? Would it be Sharpe ratio, maximum drawdown, cumulative return? Maybe it's going to be any other metrics, or maybe the combinations of all of that. That's very important to disclose which one are you choosing as your decision maker beforehand, not as to not become biased and change your decision down the line when, for example, you start to favor one strategy over the other, but it shows a bit higher performance in a bit different metric than you've chosen before. It might be still a good strategy, but not for this backtest. For this backtest, you need to abide to the rules that you've set by yourself. So these three questions are the base questions that every practitioner should ask himself about even the basis of incentives of your research. The next natural step in our progression would be questions about data and sample choice. So the choice of your data needs to be justified in advance in all cases. Do the data chosen for examination make sense is a question of utmost importance. You need to be sure of what period of time is your training sample, your testing sample. Why are you choosing this data? All of these questions have to be answered beforehand to avoid the bias of overfitting that might come after it if we try to explain the reasoning before choosing a bit different period afterwards, just because it might perform a bit better. No, everything should be established beforehand to ensure the utmost quality of your results and the utmost integrity as well. And talking about the integrity, the second question would be, did you take steps to ensure the integrity of the data? As a lot of people know, in most models, garbage in, garbage out. If you do not care about the quality of your data, you should not expect the quality from your results. Data cleaning should be applied to a lot of data, especially in the case of machine learning, when this is a crucial step that is taken before even trying to start any type of research. And the thing is, we need to be very, very careful with our data manipulation and data cleaning, and be very precise with the techniques we apply. And also, as following the structure and the rules that we said beforehand, everything should be also disclosed beforehand. The cleaning, the steps, the techniques, everything. So this leads us to the next question. Do the data transformation or outlier exclusion make sense? Were they selected in advance? So a lot of people, me as well, nobody is an exclusion from this kind of guess. At least once in their life, they modified or scaled their data before applying any model to it. The thing is, we always need to disclose any type of data manipulation beforehand. And also ensure that the slight changes in data transformation will not affect the rigidity and robustness of the data. On the other hand, other thing that I mentioned is the outlier exclusion. The outlier exclusion is much more sensitive topic, as you need to really have a very hard economic evidence to exclude any outliers from your data. Because if your model actually works and describes the data, it should describe all data without any distinction onto the convenient data and inconvenient outliers. This is how proper models should work, and this is time and time again highlighted by Dr. DiPrato, Dr. And Pervushyna, and countless researchers in their paper. If your model makes sense on the regular data and gives the result, it should output the results on the outliers. So, concluding this chapter, we can say only one sentence. Be transparent with your data choices and disclose it beforehand. This is our main idea. Pretty simple and pretty obvious, as most of the questions are in this list, but only after asking ourselves those questions, we can kind of bring it from our subconscious to our conscious and start to be more aware of our own potential shortcomings while performing the backtest, and thus leading us to building even better and more robust models that stellarly perform in the future. Let's move on to the next step, shall we? Cross-validation, and very important part. The thing is that every researcher has to understand that out of sample is never really out of sample, as most of the out of sample periods are taken from the historical data, and we obviously have lived through this historical period, or at least know that it has happened in the past. So we have the knowledge of the price movements, we have the understanding of the historical background, and even then the understanding of the variables that drove the markets to move up or down beforehand. So it actually can't be called a really out of sample, as we are aware of what was going on in this period. The closest thing to true out of sample would be live trading, but as like, even if we can't do our perfect out of sample testing, we can at least strive to do it as fast as we can. And the awareness of the imperfection is a big step for our true, honest recognition of our models' wins and losses. Then let's move to the next question. Are the steps in place to eliminate the risk of out of sample iterations? This is a very, very interesting point. That is a mistake that might be very obvious and maybe even shouldn't be worth mentioning, but I think that it is very important to include it. The iterations on the out of sample data is a very natural and very tempting thing to do. You perform the backtest on your out of sample data. The model performed stellarly on your trading data, but not quite well on your testing sample. And only a minor tweak will help it and make it perform so much better. But do not be tempted, as this small change will likely lead to nothing but overfitting and will highly likely impact, not in a good way, its performance on your future live trading. So be aware of our of the tempting nature of out of sample iterations and try to stay away from it to achieve your great and perfect backtest that we all strive to have. The last, but definitely not least point in this cluster would be something that I'd like to very much empathize on. It is, do you account for trading costs and fees? In the most of the academic research, as we all know it, the trading costs and fees are not usually accounted for or even blatantly ignored. But as long as you don't plan your strategy to be a purely theoretical thing, then the trading costs and fees inclusion is a must, since training your model without them would be like shooting yourself in the foot before a marathon. Why would you try to kind of hinder your performance by risking a chance that with the inclusion of the trading costs and fees, your strategy might be rendered useless during the live trading period. Why would you even spend so much time on kind of researching, spend so much energy and your brain power on creating a perfect strategy without accounting for one of the most commonly encountered things in live trading? So I think this part is very, very important, and this is the question that should be asked all the time when you're performing the backtest. So yeah, this was our cross-validation chapter, and we can move on to the next. The next topic would be more machine learning centered. We call that machine learning model dynamics. Implementing machine learning based strategies, what we seek for is interpretable machine learning. So the natural questions that should be answered is, first, does the analysis take into account the risk and likelihood of our crowding in live data? So what we're talking about is very well reflected by the Heisenberg's law. So Heisenberg's law states that we cannot know the position and the momentum of the particle with the same accuracy at the same time. We need to choose one or the other. The same thing would be to know the what characteristics are we striving to know better? Do we want to know more about the past or about the future? It's only natural that if we dive too much into discerning the impacting factors of the past, we might find them being rendered useless in the future, as they are something that we already know and it is already taken into account by default. So this is an important thing to think about while devising your machine learning model. The second question would be, do you take steps to minimize the tweaking of a live model? This step is very, very close to the second step from our cross-validation section, as it's also kind of it also kind of panders to our human nature and our wanting, like, these temptations of improve our model just a tiny bit to perform better or in our out of sample testing, or in this case on the live data. Tweaking your model to fit the current data more will more likely cause overfitting and failure on future periods than actually do more good. So sometimes you just need to trust the model and look at how it actually performs to assess its true results and its true power. Okay, the last question in this bunch is also very, very important, especially in the machine learning paradigm, is, are you, as a researcher, aware of the curse of dimensionality? The curse of dimensionality is basically, with every new variable, you need more data. And as we quantitative researchers know, the data in our field is a very, very limited resource and very incomplete compared to the physicists who can replicate their trial hundreds and millions of times at perfect conditions. The only thing that we actually have is historical data that can't be just taken out of our heads and imagined or refilled or simulated. So let me give you an example of such problems. For example, you want to simulate a cross-section of stock prices. What are you going to base this simulation on? Most obvious choice would be the historical stock prices, right? But there are also other things that might be taken into account: bid-ask spread, volatility, the volume of the trade, the option closing prices, tons of stuff actually. But with addition of each of those variables comes the question, do we have the data to back it up? Do we have the data with the correct frequency to suit our model? So here we always pick and choose our battles. This is the curse of dimensionality that every practitioner should be very, very well aware. And I think that's going to be the end of this bigger section that relates to technical question. And it leaves us with one topic that we haven't touched on. That is, in my opinion, one of the most important things to keep in mind. This is the fact that the most important part is having a proper research culture. We as practitioners should reward good science and proper research, not overly focusing on the backtest with winning results. If we want to achieve a true great results, we want to get a truly astounding research and amazing strategies coming out of our research. This is the way that it should be. The good research and good science and good critique would always come first before the results of the winning backtest, or maybe it will show a stellar performance, but if it's false, does it actually really matter? So in short, our goal is not to eliminate all false positives. That would be actually pretty easy. You should just reject all the hypotheses, all the strategies, everything. Then no false positives will be ever taking place. But what we strive to achieve is a meaningful trade-off between minimizing false positive strategies, but not missing many good ones. And the presented list of questions, it is applicable to most research tools used in investment strategy research, from portfolio sorts to machine learning, that will act as a sanity check for you as a researcher to perform even before you start backtesting, and kind of prepare your mind and put you in a correct state to perform the most perfect research that you can. Adopting this process is good for the client and good for the reputation of the investment managers. So actually, it's benefiting everybody. I would like to mention that the references are presented in this last slide, and you can always access the presentation down below. And I highly, highly recommend you to check out these papers that were mentioned on this page and read for yourself and look deeper into the topic, because the more great backtests are happening in the world, the more quality of our strategies and the research and the quantitative research field rises to the new heights. And this will actually benefit everybody in the field. I thank you for sticking with me till the end of this video, and I'm very grateful for your attention. I hope you took something new for yourself, took something interesting, and I highly, highly recommend you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more information, and a link to the presentation and much more. Our lectures from our channel will be in the description down below. I thank you again for your attention. Bye-bye. See you again.